Hey everybody, welcome back to Place Navigators. Hey, one thing that we're going to keep giving you is that consistency. We are consistently giving you guys our knowledge in the real estate field. You got me, Chris
Yeah.
Elder, and
Joe Platts, episode 4, Chris. Here we go. Let's kill this. Hey, so last episode we talked about what, Chris?
we talked about some strategies. Honestly, first off, my first strategy was just how to live rent free,
Yeah,
and it just kind of boiled down even further than that. We
right.
talked about bunch of different strategies. Take a listen
Yep.
to our other episode. We
Yep.
don't want to go into that because we have so much to cover in this episode in the short little period that
Right.
we have, brother.
Right.
So
Right.
let's,
Yep. Strategy is important, but we're going to talk about two families that did some implementation on this episode. These stories they got a little fuzz on them. They're not the newest, latest, and greatest, and here's why. Real estate is a long-term investment strategy. The flash in the pan stuff is what they're selling in the seminars and the midnight TV and all that kind of stuff. It's the get rich stuff. I had this lady call me today and she's like, "Oh, your seller consider terms and I can do like 5% down." And I was like, "Well, transaction fees are going to be like between 8 and 9%." Like, I tried to have a logical conversation with her, and I could just tell, man, she got one of them gurus that like charged her $2,000 to tell her how to buy real estate, and she doesn't have a clue. So we want to dig into that.
yeah, it's something I just want to put out there about those gurus. It's one thing to watch these YouTube shorts, and I'm not going to name any of the gurus on here. You can watch all these YouTube shorts, all that stuff. But everybody's story is different, and unless you're working with an actual professional that's going to sit down and get to know your story, it's going to be really hard to apply some of that stuff into your life. So just keep everything that we say, take it with a grain of salt. Take it with like, hey, maybe my strategy could be a little bit different. It's not going to look exactly the same, and Joe's going to be laying out some awesome, it's going to sound almost miracle-ish numbers out there.
It's
And
pretty
it's
wild.
real life. Real
Real
life
life.
real estate is
Hmm.
the most common way to become a multimillionaire. And
Yep.
Joe and I have seen it, we've lived it, and we want everybody around us to be a part of it. So,
Yeah.
Joe, brother, tell me some of the life changing stories that
Yeah.
you've seen, brother.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna tell you first about this family that came to me, and in the time that this happened, this was 2016. These folks, their children are my peers. So they were old enough to be my parents. And they had this really interesting situation. And that was that they worked for this nonprofit organization overseas as English teachers. And what they said is we've been saving our money in the US for as long as we can, but we're in a situation where we don't really have any retirement. And one of their children was going through a life-changing event and needed a place to live. And they knew they had a long tenure that they were still going to be overseas. So they said, we want to talk about some strategies. And the strategy we came up with was one, we needed to be able to help them invest their money because their money was like sitting in a savings account, not making any money, not making jack. Second was by investing their money in a home, we could create a place for their adult child that kind of needed a hand up to have a place to live. So 2016, they buy a home in Linwood, Washington for 375,000. 4 bedroom, 2.5 bath, 2 car garage, yard, all the normal stuff. Fairly recent kitchen remodel. And that home became the home that their adult child and their grandchildren lived in, and they lived in that home for 3 years. So Chris, in 3 years, how much equity gain from 375 do you think was possible?
Oh man, I'm just gonna go what rough numbers, just make it really easy. What was it, like 100,000? I'm saying, normally I think, 30 every year. So I
Sure.
30, just 100,000 for 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's what's wild about this family. So the folks that were overseas, um, Mrs. Homer, she actually got a cancer diagnosis, and I can share with you today that she's cancer free, she's healthy, she's living life like she's a walking, talking miracle, and we're super grateful for that. So I get the call in 2019. Hey, the organization we work for is sending us home. Life has changed again for our child. They're getting married. They're going to buy their own home. We actually helped them buy their home, so we got to work with them. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to cash in their investment, and they were being stationed at the headquarters of this nonprofit, which was somewhere in Missouri, I believe it was. And so we got the property ready for market. We listed the home. We sold that home for $520,000 just 3 years later. It was a $145,000 gain in equity, which equates to about $48,000 a year. So let me ask you this, Chris.
Wow.
You've worked for the government, which is kind of like working for a nonprofit. Well, they're pretty non-profitable, but that being said,
Yeah.
yeah. But that being said, what what if anything could somebody that maybe isn't making the highest wage do besides invest in real estate that they could add $48,000 a year to their life?
I'm going to tell you right now, I hear everybody go, I would be a first time buyer. I'm going to save up money. And I'm like, you're actually losing money by saving money because that money that you're making is actually eroding if you put it into a bank, but
Mhm,
it's not eroding in a house.
mhm.
And that's amazing. That's well above the norm. And wow, I bet
So
you
I
they
could have
felt
bought
like
Bitcoin.
geniuses.
I could have bought gold. I could have put it in the S&P 500, right? Like, but what I mean, when you think about that, like there's tools that people use in that arena, like the rule of 72, right? Like pragmatically, we got a $375,000 weigh in, and what they did is they used some money that they had as the down payment. So say they could put the full 20% down. I don't remember this part, but they put that full 20% down. They put in a $75,000 investment. Now, the house payment was being made by the occupant, happened to be their child, right? But the house payment's being made, and they're kicking out $48,000 a year in return. To the point you made, Chris, you can't save and you can't catch the train faster than what the train moves, because that $145,000 is a lot of money to walk away with inside of 3 years. They were able to take that equity, and if they didn't pay cash for the house in Missouri, they paid a huge down payment. And I'm still in contact with that family today. They're doing great. They're happy. Their kids are still in the area, and we've got to help them along the way. And it's just it really was a poetic solution to the we have no retirement. We're sitting on this money. We're kind of scared. We don't know what to do. We need to help our child. And here was the solution.
Yeah. And, I don't know how accurate the number is, but hey, AI, you can look this up. If you were to put in Bitcoin, it would have lost money in that time frame. I'm just saying. So if you were to go back 3 years, you would see that your $150,000 investment today,
Yeah,
February
yeah.
time frame, if you were to go back in 2021, and I wanted to prove this to our listeners just by typing in Chat GPT, which is amazing, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
So 2021, if you would have put $150,000 in there, what would you have today? Well, it just spit out 93,000. So you would have lost money,
Mm.
and you're like, oh, I need to save, I need to invest. People are investing in this, that stuff. It's just it does not have the same rate of return as a house. It doesn't have that consistency with the security.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that houses always
Yeah,
consistently perform. Hey, we
yeah.
have our down times, but more
Hey,
more than average, we
yeah.
are on the upside.
Hey, if that 3 year span was 2005 and they took the exit at 2008, it'd be a different story. But that's why it's long term investing. It wasn't my preference that they stayed invested for those 3 years, but life happened, and that life was the big C. And so when we go into making the plans on what we're going to buy and invest in, and I think we need to start with the realization and the conclusion, I guess, that our first investment is the home that we live in. And so when you take that into consideration, then it starts to paint a different picture. And had the market been different, even if all the facts were true, but the dates were different, it was the 2005 to 2008 thing, we would have just stayed in the market. Like, we would have kept the house. Maybe we would have leased it out to somebody else. Maybe they would have gotten a variance from the employer to live in Washington State until they could get to Missouri, right? We would have found a solution besides take it on the chin. But fortunately, that situation resolved itself, and the market was favorable.
Yeah,
So
brother.
yeah, so I'm gonna give you, like, honestly, one of my most favorite stories as the next one. This thing was drama. Like this was before we had a lot of those like real estate TV shows. And if I had had the right genius, like, we would have made this a TV show. Okay. So 2013, 11 years ago, I got this 26-year-old, fairly newly married couple. 2013, the market's still like, we're flushing the foreclosures out. Like, 2012 was really when we felt in Western Washington, really when we felt things start to come back. But we still had some junk, and we're working the junk out. So here's this 26-year-old couple, brand new baby. I have them come into the office. We sit down, we do something called a buyer's consult. And here's what this dude tells me. He just deadpan looks me in the eye. And he says, I want the cheapest 4-bedroom house in this county. And I was like, you probably don't. He's like, no, I do. So we do the whole MLS thing, right? Zillow wasn't invented until like 2006 or 2007, but it still sucked at this time. Like, it was slow. So we're working on the MLS. Well, it still sucks, but that's a different story. We were working on this thing. They're looking at my screen, and we're going through and we're looking at this, and we put together this list of properties. And we go out to this place called Arlington, Washington. And I park in the driveway, and I open the door to my car. And as I step out, I can smell mold from outside the house. This thing is a government foreclosure. Something terrible's happened. Here's Mr. and Mrs. 26-year-old homebuyer holding their little baby. And I look at them and I say, I don't think it's safe to go in. I don't think we should be breathing this stuff outside, let alone inside. They're like, no, we want to see the house. So we go in the house. This thing is a wreck. Here's what happened. It's in a part of Arlington that is so far from a fire station. When the house was built, it was required to have sprinklers put in the ceiling. And something that we learned, we got a real education in during the foreclosure crisis, is when people are in default, the bank will send around people to look at the house and see if somebody lives there. And if they don't live there, they pop the locks and they winterize the property. So the people had moved out, whatever reason, don't know if they were good guys or bad guys, why they couldn't make their mortgage payment. People had moved out. The bank had showed up. They changed the locks and they'd winterize the property. But what they didn't winterize is they didn't winterize that sprinkler system in the ceiling. So winter came, winter froze the pipes, spring was here, the pipes went pop, the water started at the top of the house, split level, went all the way down through the bottom, soaked everything through. The whole thing was a chia pet, growing mold. We walked these guys through it, or I walked these guys through it. I didn't have a team then. Team was me, president and janitor. Not a lot different than today, but anyways, at least I got an assistant janitor now. But they're like, we want this house. It is the cheapest 4-bedroom house in this county. We want it. I'm like, you do not want this house. And they're like, no, we want it. We want it. We want it. Had them pre-approved with one of my lenders at that time. She was like the #1 first-time buyer lender in the state. and we turn this dog in, and it kicks back. Lender will not lend on the property because it's in too poor condition, which is not an uncommon thing. And so I call them and I say, hey, can't get financing on the property. You would have to pay cash. And their response, Chris, was, is there any other way? You ever heard of something called HomePath?
No.
All right. Well, during the foreclosure time, when they were government owned, they have this thing, it's still around today, and it was called a HomePath loan. A HomePath loan is basically the government acknowledging we already own this dog, and if somebody will make payments on it, that's better than nothing. So they'll finance it, even though it ain't financeable, because they already own the debt on it. So we were able to get these guys into this HomePath loan where they were able to close on this roach for $165,000. I felt guilty the whole time. I felt like I was doing something awful to these guys. I kept trying to talk them out of it. They kept saying, no, we want it. We want it. I'm like, your kids are going to die. You're probably going to die. During the home inspection, we turned the water on. This fun side story. We turned the water on. I'm standing in the garage. We turn on the water and we're trying to figure out, like, what's going on. And we're expecting like all the sprinklers and stuff in the house to be, the issue. Well, there's exposed water lines in the garage. And I'm standing there, and like under one arm, I got like a leather bound portfolio. And under the other arm, I don't know why, but that day I had my laptop tucked in under my arm. They turn on the water, and I'm standing in the middle of the garage, and it was like being in a car wash. There's water going sideways. There's water spraying. Like I'm a drowned rat at this home inspection. And the whole thing, I'm like, this is going to ruin my cell phone. It's going to ruin my laptop. Like, I'm just pissed because I'm like, this house is the devil house, right? It's full of mold. It's going to kill people. It just killed my laptop. I took a shower this morning, but now I just got another one with my clothes on. And so we get that house done. And the guy, he promises me, my client, the buyer, he promised me, I'm really handy. I'm gonna fix every inch of this place. And I'm like, buddy, you better. So we fast forward 9 years. Okay. We go all the way from 2013 to 2022. Now, about 2019, they start calling me. It might be time. Let's maybe talk about the value of the home. And we'd get started and they'd say, nah, it's not the right time. Then we'd get started again. Nah, it's not the right time. Okay. So 3 years back and forth, on, off. Okay. So they call me 2022 and they say, this is the time. We are moving out of state. We're selling the house. We got every inch of it done. We know you haven't seen the house for years. Cause like I'd even try to, connect with them, pop by, we're busy, whatever. Okay, fine. And Chris, I go out to this house, and if I hadn't have been there for that inspection and that car wash, I wouldn't have believed you it was the same house. Guy really was a craftsman. He really did a beautiful job. And what we were able to do is in 2022, we sold that house for $640,000. In 9 years, they made $475,000, about $52,000 per year. My other example, they made $48,000 per year. Interesting. And at age 35, because they had so much equity in their home and they were moving to Wisconsin, they'd done a good job of not going into a lot of debt when they were younger. They bought the cheapest house in the county. They proved me completely wrong. They remodeled every inch of that. They got a huge windfall out of it. They had a place to live. They had a tax deduction from having the mortgage interest. Like they had a home for their children. Now they got 3 kids and 2 dogs. They financially retired because they paid cash for their home in Wisconsin. And they were able to say, like, hey, if money ever gets tight, we could pick up a job at Walmart or McDonald's or like anything. We could work minimum wage and we'd be fine because we're completely financially free because of the windfall of that home.
That's awesome. And it's so amazing what equity can do. and that's awesome. You said $52,000 a year. Is that correct? Did I hear that
52,000
correct?
a year. Yeah.
$52 thousand
Yeah.
dollars a year,
Yeah.
and I mean the guy was probably working his butt off the first couple of years.
Oh, I mean, I'm not going to say it was easy. I mean, it was hard work. It was a disaster. But he had a vision, and he had a better vision than me, and I was supposed to know more about real estate than he did. And his vision was, get me in the door. Get me the lowest payment possible. If there's no other loan besides the home path loan, like give me that loan. Like just get me in there. I'm going to remodel this. It's going to be fine. None of them have, cancer or glow in the dark or anything like, I mean, it was a serious overhaul. I mean, that thing had water everywhere. The floors were, I mean, it was a big project. But he took that project on and made $475,000 in 9 years. And so it
Yeah,
just makes me want to think, if think about this. What if you paid rent for the last 9 years? What would you have? Wouldn't be retired at 35, right? Dude's 37
wow.
years old today, and they're living life. They're doing great. The kids are great. He goes to all the games, does all the sports. Him and his wife are there all the time. Neither one of them work. Like they just live a great life, and it's all because one investment, and he stuck in it.
Yeah, buying a home is really the ultimate investment in not only yourself but your family as well. Having a roof over your head that you own is going to set you up tremendously for success. So that's so awesome, and we would love to hear those listeners out there. If you have any phenomenal stories, we would love to hear your stories as
Yeah.
well. Put comments and down below and let us know what your stories are. And for those who are listening, this could be your story. And
Mm,
believe it or not, those are very common stories that we hear about. There's some
mm,
even crazier stories of people doing incredibly successful and turning around and buying another place and turn around and buying another place and just compounding that over and over again. So it is completely doable. And how many properties what was it that it takes to make a multimillionaire?
5. Whoops, there we go. 5.
Yeah, 5 properties.
Yeah, 5.
Yeah,
Yeah.
five
You know,
properties.
Chris, I'll offer our place navigators a gift. I have the spreadsheet with the model for 5 or 10 properties to make you a multimillionaire. So if they subscribe, leave a comment, and DM us their email, I'll send them it, and then they can start to chart their path on how they're going to create their own financial freedom.
Yeah, you guys heard it. Joe, thank you so much for sharing those stories.
Yeah,
And to everybody else that's out there, you got Place Navigators here to help you out. Joe and me, we're both in Washington and Idaho area, but it doesn't matter where you're at. We're still here. We can help you in your journey.
absolutely. Absolutely. The Place Network goes coast to coast, 250 locations, 3,000 people. Regardless of where you are, we've got somebody that can help you. And we'll sign off with the old wise tale of, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. But if not then, today. And turns out buying a home is just like that. This is Joe Platts and Chris Elder with Place Navigators. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Take care.